So now we'll turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you. Dana Beach, Roy Richards, supporters of the Coastal Conservation League and concerned citizens. It's a real honor and privilege to be part of this celebration of the Coastal Conservation League's 25th anniversary. And I want to congratulate Dana Beach and the board and staff of the League for the extraordinary, inspiring, and outstanding leadership they have given the environmental movement in South Carolina. It's also a real honor to be on this panel this morning with Gus Speth and David Orr. Keeping in mind Dana's charge to the panel, and let me first just say the title of my panel, of my remarks this morning, is What Hope Requires of Us. What Hope Requires of Us. And there's a subtitle, Finding Ourselves in Relation to Nature. So keeping in mind Dana's charge to all of us, what I would like to do is focus on one important piece of the larger complex environmental challenge, and that is the ethical and spiritual dimension. I want to ask, what does prosperous, low-country, flourishing planet mean as an ethical and spiritual ideal? It underscores the increasing interconnection between the local and the global, and I will argue that it challenges us to recognize that caring for people and caring for Earth are two interrelated aspects of one great task. It is our destiny in the 21st century to have to take this truth to heart and to create a way of life that conforms to it. Now, ethical values define what a society considers good and bad, right and wrong, just and fair. They clarify our social responsibilities and obligations in relation to each other. Our ethical values are a product of our interdependence. We cannot survive and flourish alone. We need each other, we need community, and we need cooperation, and cooperation requires common goals and shared values. Further, as human beings, we have the capacity to identify with the aspirations and sufferings of other people, and empathy generates compassion, and compassion deepens our sense of social responsibility. And the history of humanity's ethical consciousness has been a story of ever greater inclusion as the human sense of community and responsibility expands. In an increasingly interdependent world where people are linked socially, economically, and ecologically, we need now globally shared goals and values. When the UN World Commission on Environment and Development issued its report, Our Common Future, in 1987, the Commission put the concept of sustainable development on the international agenda. It emphasized the eradication of poverty as fundamental to the goal of sustainability, and it highlighted intergenerational responsibility as the moral imperative that is part of the concept of sustainable development. The good news is that we're in the early stages of a sustainability revolution that, if successful, will reinvent industrial technological civilization, renew and reform our democracy, and restore the health and beauty of Earth's ecosystems. Reflecting the way the spirit of the worldwide sustainability movement has come to South Carolina, the chairman of the Charleston County Council, Teddy Pryor, recently wrote in the Post and Courier, "As we celebrate Earth Day 2013, Charleston can be proud of the great strides we've made in greening our community and promoting sustainability for our children and future generations. And there is much that the Lowcountry can be proud of." Mr. Pryor highlighted the success of Charleston's sophisticated new recycling system. The Ace Basin is a national treasure, and the way the unique natural beauty and wildlife habitat of that region has been preserved for future generations is a model of private, state, and federal collaboration. The Coastal Conservation League's Sustainable Agricultural Initiative, to which we were all introduced and nourished, by which we were all nourished last night, promotes small-scale farming, sustainable livelihoods, poverty eradication, and environmental protection, and this is exactly the kind of project that was envisioned by Our Common Future. private sector and government leaders in South Carolina are improving energy efficiency and beginning to focus on the great potential in the Lowcountry for the development of solar energy and offshore wind energy, which would be a win-win for both the economy and the planet. With far-sighted leadership and citizen support, the Lowcountry could become an inspiring model of sustainable development for the nation. The bad news is that the opposition is well organized and funded, and the most dangerous planetary trends, such as global warming, have not been reversed. When one adopts a global perspective and considers that our generation is in the process of leaving to future generations worldwide an ecologically degraded, resource-depleted, overheated, overpopulated planet, suffering major losses in biodiversity and beauty and facing rising seas and more severe violent weather, one has to conclude that present generations are failing seriously in our responsibility to future generations. To leave to future generations a world in this condition is a grave injustice. It's a violation of basic human rights. And those who will suffer most are the poor, who have done the least to cause the harm. Part of the problem is that our economic system in its current form prioritizes short-term growth and profits above all else, often ignoring or denying the long-term consequences and the harm ecologically and socially they may involve. However, underlying the problematic relation of industrial technological civilization to future generations is a deeper issue, involving the nature of our relationship to Earth itself and to the greater community of life of which we are all an interdependent part. An ethical and spiritual perspective can help to illuminate what is fundamentally wrong in this regard. Spiritual and ethical growth and development are about being more, not having more, leading to right relationship. Right relationship with oneself, other persons, the larger living world, and the great mystery that is the sacred source of all life. Finding ourselves as individuals and communities in relation to nature has become a fundamental spiritual as well as economic challenge at this pivotal moment in the evolution of society. The major obstacle to right relationship with the larger living world is a set of attitudes and values linked to the anthropocentric worldview that guides thinking and action in industrial technological society. Modern civilization does not really believe in the principle of respect for nature as a fundamental guideline. Respect means recognizing that the other has intrinsic worth and that one has moral responsibilities and obligations in relation to the other. Here in the Lowcountry, many individuals do know and love their bioregion, and that bond is celebrated in all the wonderful art that you see in Charleston's museums and galleries. However, when one looks at the dominant patterns of production and consumption, one is forced to conclude that modern society as a whole does not understand itself to be an interdependent part of the larger natural world. Nature is viewed as basically a stage set for human history or a warehouse of resources that exist for human exploitation. Nature is thought to have instrumental or utilitarian value only. The tendency is to think of the human species as the center of everything, and of other species in the planet as just a means to human ends, and not also ends in themselves worthy of moral consideration. Now, many decades ago, Abraham Joshua Heschel, a Jewish theologian and one of the great religious thinkers of the last century, wrote the following: "As civilization advances, the sense of wonder declines. Such decline is an alarming symptom of our state of mind. Mankind will not perish for want of information, but for want of appreciation." Now, it's not my intention to focus on the negative and dwell on it. Rather, I want to focus on what can give us hope and on what realization of that hope demands of us. A change in worldview that has dominated modern society is actually today underway. First of all, human beings have not always had the attitudes toward nature that are so prevalent in our society. Many indigenous peoples have lived with a deep sense of belonging to nature and with admiration and respect for Mother Earth. Over the centuries, various prophets, mystics, and scientists have recognized the idea that the universe revolves around humanity as a delusion, like all forms of hubris and egocentricity. The world's great spiritual teachers have consistently warned that once basic needs are met, having more wealth, power, fame, and pleasure is not the key to enduring happiness and fulfillment. Further, and this is what I want to emphasize, there are major forces at work in our world that are causing a dramatic shift in the awareness and values of millions of people, leading to emergence of a new biocentric or ecocentric worldview which emphasizes being more and which integrates a vision of social justice with what some theologians today call creation justice. Every great civilization in the past, in different geographical regions, has produced its own distinctive form of spiritual and ethical consciousness, leading to formation of the world's religions. Modern industrial technological society is often thought to be hostile to religion and supportive of secularism, materialism, and atheism. However, as economic globalization and the information revolution create for the first time an interdependent planetary civilization, these forces, the very forces that are causing much of the trouble, are also generating an awareness of the world as one interconnected whole and producing a new global consciousness. The new science is contributing to emergence of this new global consciousness by providing us with an understanding of Earth, our planetary home, as one interdependent, self-organizing ecosystem that is interconnected with a vast evolving universe. In and through development of the ethical and spiritual dimension, the next point I want to make is that this new planetary awareness is now producing its own spiritual and ethical consciousness. And it's in and through the development of this new ethical and spiritual dimension of the global consciousness that industrial technological civilization is seeking its spiritual center and striving to transform itself. It is like an evolutionary force at work. And here are some examples of what I have in mind. Over the past 60 years, a vision of universal values inspired by the new global consciousness has been taking form and has been clearly articulated in a number of international declarations. After 2 world wars, the great work and most urgent ethical challenge facing the human community was to build an international system to promote peace and equitable development in the midst of great cultural diversity. And toward that end, to instill in all people an awareness that as human beings we share a common identity with every other human being and should respect the equal dignity and rights of every person regardless of gender, race, nationality, or religion. Now, these values and principles are set forth in the Charter of the United Nations and in the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And human rights have evolved now to include the right to a safe environment that supports human health and well-being. To put it simply, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights reflects a growing worldwide ethical realization that in the midst of great diversity, we are one human family and should build together an equitable, just, participatory, peaceful, and democratic society. Now, a new global ethic of respect and care for the community of life is also taking form, but not without strong resistance. In an essay, The Land Ethic, which Dana has already highlighted, published in 1949, which is now regarded as having inspired the whole field of environmental ethics, Aldo Leopold, an American forester and ecologist, articulated the essential principle in just the words that Dana read this morning, but I'll read them again. A land ethic changes the role of Homo sapiens from conqueror of the land community to plain member and citizen of it. It implies respect for his fellows and also respect for the community as such. Leopold adds dryly, and I quote, "In human history we have learned, I hope, that the conqueror role is eventually self-defeating." The extension of a sense of ethical obligation from the human community to the larger community of life, Leopold argues, is an evolutionary possibility and an ecological necessity. During the 1960s, in the international environmental conservation community, a small group of leaders and international law experts began to think about a universal declaration on respect to nature that would complement the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And their efforts led to adoption of the World Charter for Nature in 1982 by the UN General Assembly. In the preamble, the World Charter takes the radical position that non-human species have intrinsic value, and these are the words: every form of life is unique, warranting respect regardless of its worth to man, and to accord other organisms such recognition, man must be guided by a moral code of action. 1982. The World Charter for Nature challenges us to recognize, in the words of Albert Schweitzer, that life as such is sacred. Or, as Thomas Berry put it, we are one Earth community, and all life forms and ecosystems have certain basic rights. Now, the first principle of the World Charter declares nature shall be respected and its essential processes shall not be impaired. Leopold's land ethic had won international recognition. However, even though the U.S. was the only nation to vote against the World Charter for Nature in 1982, state governments very quickly turned their back on the notion of the intrinsic value of nature. At the great Rio Earth Summit in 1992, no reference was made to the World Charter for Nature in the Rio Declaration and in Agenda 21. And efforts to draft an Earth Charter that reaffirms the new ethic of respect for nature and integrates it with the concept of sustainable development failed. This led to a worldwide civil society initiative to draft the Earth Charter that developed into the most open and participatory process ever associated with the drafting of an international declaration. The Earth Charter, which was launched in 2000, is a declaration of global interdependence and shared responsibility with fundamental principles for building a just, sustainable, and peaceful world in the 21st century. Its first principles are the imperative to respect Earth and life in all its diversity and to care for the community of life with understanding, compassion, and love. As Jacques Cousteau once put it, we will only protect what we love. The Earth Charter includes sections on ecological integrity, social and economic justice, and democracy, nonviolence, and peace. It has been endorsed by over 5,000 organizations, including UNESCO, the World Conservation Congress of IUCN, and by over 800 organizations in the United States, including the U.S. Conference of Mayors. The Earth Charter movement is a very good example of the worldwide awakening in civil society of a new global ethical consciousness rooted in a life-affirming relational spirituality. There are those who want us to believe that the Lowcountry and civilization at large can achieve sustainable development without an ethic of respect, restraint, and care in relation to the greater community of life. We've been conducting that experiment for decades, and all the evidence indicates that the idea of sustainability without formation in the public mind of what Aldo Leopold called an ecological conscience is a dream. It's unrealistic. Most people would say, oh, it's very idealistic to think of having an ethic of respect for nature. But the truth is, it's the only realistic alternative that faces us today. Our best hope for a just and sustainable future is for civil society, business, and government to work together collaboratively with long-term thinking and with the vision that we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. This principle should be applied locally in each bioregion like the Lowcountry and globally. This is possible. It will take extraordinary innovation, it will take humility, it will take courage, but the choice is ours. It is possible. Now, one additional thought regarding appreciation and respect for the Earth community. It is well to remember that it took 3 billion years to form the community of life that has generated the human species and sustained it. Furthermore, as far as we know, Earth's biosphere is something very rare, perhaps unique in the universe as a whole. We should honor our planetary home as a true wonder, as an awesome reality, as something fragile, precious, and sacred. Caring for Earth and caring for each other will be strengthened if we can put faith in and develop reverence for the mystery of being that is within each of us and all around us. And ask yourself sometimes, why is there something and not nothing? Right? Why is there something and not nothing? The mystery of being. Now, I want to bring this to a conclusion and say that, in conclusion, the struggle for the future of life on Earth is a contest between two distinct worldviews that support very different values and visions of the good life. One is anthropocentric and promotes a having orientation as the pathway to individual happiness and social progress. The other is biocentric, and it emphasizes a global awareness, being more, and an inclusive vision of right relationship as the path to true well-being. As the spreading damage to Earth's life-giving capacities reveals, the anthropocentric having more orientation to the world is flawed and puts the whole future of human civilization at risk. The promise and the vision of prosperous, low-country, flourishing planet is linked to a biocentric, being more orientation to the world. Advancing this worldview and all the practical changes it involves is all part of the great work that lies before the Coastal Conservation League and the Lowcountry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fantastic, Stephen. David is going to speak in a minute. Gus, thoughts on reaction, commentary?
I thought that was fantastic. We think of value change and the kind of transformation that that Stephen so eloquently described as sort of an exogenous thing, something that's happened, but it really is a product in large part of human agency, of things that we can make happen. We don't. Senator Moynihan had a great phrase, one time. He said, "The central conservative truth is that value and cultures really do matter," and that's something that the conservatives have hammered, and correctly, he said. But the central liberal truth, if I can use that word, is that a society can work to change its values, to raise its consciousness, and to save it from itself. And I think we see a lot of ways that values can be changed. Certainly, crises can change values, as the Great Depression did in this country, and as at 9/11 could have done, I would argue. Certainly all types of education contribute to value change. Our faith communities, which are really empowered, really authorized in a way to talk to us about values, can have a huge effect and are having a big effect. Transformative leadership can help us raise our consciousness, change our values, move our society. Social movements are all about consciousness raising, and we need more of that. And then bringing the future into the present so people can really see that it works, that there are new sets of values at play that are yielding different results in our communities and building different things in our communities. Seeing it happen, seeing is believing, and that can also contribute to value change. So I think all the, those are some of the things that are kind of, pragmatic paths to this deeper realization that Stephen described.
Stephen and I did not coordinate our talks. Elder Leopold, it's remarkable to have focused on that one wonderful passage, but I would just add one more thing in following on Gus's point. Seeing is believing. there's a lot of interesting research now, behavioral psychological research, that indicates that in contrast to how we, I think, traditionally perceive value and action as causal, adopting a value and then acting, increasingly we seem to understand that acting actually also generates value. And so the point is that taking actions that are responsible and are supportive of the environment builds value, because we as a species tend to want to confirm and affirm the legitimacy of those actions. So it's two ways. It moves two ways.
There's a wonderful quote that one group uses as a guiding principle that reinforces what Dana just said, that we do not think our way into a new way of life. We live our way into a new way of thinking. And so it is the action and the transforming of the environment that help all of us gradually transform the way we think and our consciousness and awareness.